Troubleshooting pipelines with CloudBees Pipeline Explorer. Here's today's starting point. I have a CloudBees CI controller version 2.401.3.3. Now let's take a look at the documentation for CloudBees Pipeline Explorer. It's a plugin that offers a streamlined approach to troubleshoot pipelines and view logs. It also provides a search feature. Now how do we get access to the Pipeline Explorer? Well, we have to first install the plugin. So the plugin that we're looking for is CloudBees Pipeline Explorer. Now I've already installed it on this controller, but let's verify that. So we'll go down to our plugins, we'll click on Installed Plugins, and let's search for Explorer. And we'll see here that CloudBees Pipeline Explorer is installed at version 1.1. Let's go back to the documentation, so we know everything's good there. There's also an important under the installing section. The CloudBees Pipeline Explorer only supports pipeline builds, number one, only pipeline, that start after the plugin is installed and enabled. So what does that mean? Well, we need to enable it. So let's go back over to our controller. We'll go back into Manage Jenkins, take a look at System, and if we search for Explorer on this page, we'll see CloudBees Pipeline Explorer. We can check that it's enabled, but we can also either enable or disable auto polling. In this case, we have it turned on to refresh every 10 seconds. So I know that my plugin is installed. I've also enabled it. So taking a look at this documentation again, any pipelines that run from this point forward are eligible. And because I have the Pipeline Explorer enabled, then I know it will be tracking the information that's necessary in order to use Pipeline Explorer. If you are doing a fresh installation of a CloudBees CI controller with version 2.401.3.3 or higher, then the plugin is automatically installed and enabled for you. Now we could go through the rest of this documentation, but just taking a look at it will make more sense. So let's go over into our controller. I've already got a job set up and I've run it once. So the way that we're going to access the Pipeline Explorer is we first have to go into the build. So I'm going to click on number one, and on the left nav, we're going to see CloudBees Pipeline Explorer. Let's go ahead and click on that. Now for this job, I have a number of parallel stages, and then I also have a build at the end. Now this visualization helps you understand, okay, in parallel, I have A, B. Under B, I also have C. So I can see A, B, and C all ran in parallel. But within branch C, I can also see that I had C1 and C2 running in parallel. So the visualization of this helps you understand how this looks. Now, what if I didn't have this? What does this look like? Let's go back up to number one and take a look at console output. The only way that we can tell that this is parallel is we see some entries here. We see some things off to the side. It's really hard to visualize how this works. So by going into build number one again and going down to CloudBees Pipeline Explorer, we're back to this visualization. Now, before we get much more into the body, let's take a look at the top. Build number one, that's pretty straightforward. We have the overall status of the job. In this case, it was successful, how long it ran, and it also gives us information of when did it start. So it took 41 seconds, but 6 minutes and 3 seconds ago is when it actually ran. We have a replay button in case we wanted to replay this job. That's just like using replay on the left nav for any pipeline job. We can also search. So in my case, I know that I've run a Maven job and I wanted to find where Surefire was on here. So I could type Surefire and hit enter, and then it shows me every line that has Surefire in it. I can say, oh, it's actually this one I want to take a look at. I can click on this link and it will open up in a new tab and take me right to that line in the log. Let's go ahead and close that up. I'm going to go ahead and go back to log right here, and I could go back to search. So it's keeping track of going from log or going back to search. But in my case, I just want to take a look at the standard log. So I'm going to refresh this page, and now I'm back to just the standard view. Let's go down to sort of the next row. We have a jump to, so we can either jump to the first line or we can jump all the way to the end. If we go over to the right-hand side, we have how many lines are in this log. In this case, it's 1,600 lines. Specifically, if you hover over it, it will tell you 1,631 lines. We also have a download link here. We can download the log. And then let's take a look at the body. We have a filter by tree view. We can either open it by default or we can close it. We'll take a look at the default here in just a moment. We can go ahead and close it and collapse it and only see the log. If we want to bring that back, we can click on the tree view expander here. If I click below this, we have an issue explorer. Now in my case, there were no errors and no warnings. There was nothing to see here. If we go down into the gear, our settings, then these are the user preferences for me. So I can either show line numbers or not. So I'm going to collapse issue explorer so I can see that closer. So in this case, I want to turn off line numbers. We will see that this column goes away. I can display colors if I had colors here. In fact, you see debug is changing from the blue to the white. I can turn on word wrap or not. I'm going to leave it on. I can also show timestamps. So right now you see the timestamps. I can turn those off and turn them back on. For the timestamps, I can choose absolute time or elapsed time. I can also set this pattern that I want to see the time in. And also, in case I've messed everything up, I can click on Reset Form to Default, and it sets all those options back to factory default. Now we can go down to Customize Behavior. You notice as things were loading up, it was scrolling down to the last line. Now I like that option, I'll leave it on, but I could also turn on Scroll to Cause a Failure on Load. So if I was to turn that on, if there were any failures, it would scroll me right to that line item in the log. Now also here, I actually have 3 options for my favorite view. Right now we're in the tree view section, which is right up here. This is tree view. But if I decided, you know what, I don't want tree view anymore, I want my favorite view instead to be Issue Explorer. That way when I come back to Pipeline Explorer, then I'm going to see Issue Explorer load up instead. But in this case, I don't want Issue Explorer. Let's go back to the gear and let's change it to none. So if I was to click on CloudBees Pipeline Explorer again in the breadcrumb, then when it loads up this time, neither Tree View or Issue Explorer are open automatically. I tend to like Tree View open by default. So the other way I can do it is just set the star so it opens it up by default. Now let's take a quick look at the job itself that ran. So we have a parallel stage here. So if I filter on parallel, what we'll see is there's the parallel stage, branch C, nested C2, nested C22. So it went all the way and analyzed it from the bottom. But if I was to scroll up, as I scroll up, we're going to see 21 come into view and B2 come into view and C21 come into view. What if I didn't want to look at all of these? If I wanted just to check out C21, I can click on the filter beside C21 and show only this stage. So if I was to scroll up, that's the only thing that I see is just C21. So depending on where I filter, it's going to track down to the bottom of whatever's happening within that particular parallel stage. In this case, if I collapse it, if I click on parallel stage here, I see everything. And in fact, I can even click on nested C2 here, and it only loads up C2 for me. So I see all the items that are just C2. So I have a lot of different ways that I can check and filter for looking at my logs. Now, if I was to take a look at build, this is just an example of running a standard job. So if I'm at the end of the log, I don't want to be there. I want to look at the top. I can click on jump to go back to the top. We're at the start of the filtered log, the filtered being the build. And then I can scroll from the top and look down. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBees. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.